one couple had 22 encounters, including 18 separate photographic sessions in a 5.5-month period. Any independent witnesses, highly credible, also reported seeing the same objects that were photographed.
Lately, Gulf Breeze has become a mecca for anyone curious about UFOs because sightings there have become almost commonplace.
So we brought in some photographic experts to look at them, and none have been able to tell that these pictures are fakes.
The UFO retraces its path, rotating as it travels through the same airspace. Notice how it goes behind the trees, in and out, reversing direction and coming back.
Of course, I read your article in Omni about the Gulf Breeze sightings.
It is actual footage of a UFO seen over Gulf Breeze in broad daylight.
Must have been a Gulf Breeze UFO.
Either you're going to have to say that all of these hundreds of people in Gulf Breeze are all deluded and part of some kind of an orchestrated hoax, or they actually saw what they saw.
My name is Holden Hardman, and I live in Pensacola, Florida, basically the next door neighbor to Gulf Breeze, Florida. I'd always been told from the locals that Gulf Breeze was the UFO hotspot of the world, but never really looked into it for myself. I decided to make a YouTube video just looking into the case, and it was originally going to be a very short video. But the more and more I looked into the Gulf Breeze sightings, the more and more weird stuff I found. Even if you're already familiar with the case that took place between the end of 1987 and early 1988, I guarantee you haven't heard everything yet. In November of 1987, a man named Ed Walters claimed to have taken photos of a UFO right outside his house. For the next few months, hundreds of witnesses would come forward claiming to have seen UFOs in the sky, many of which claimed that the UFOs they had seen matched the pictures that Ed Walter had taken. Now, over the next few months, Ed claimed to have been followed by multiple types of UFOs that relentlessly pursued him and his wife. There was even some physical evidence of the UFOs, like scorch marks left over on grass that didn't grow for the next 18 months, some black tar that would come out of the craft itself that Ed claimed to have contained and kept. Even blue beams that were shot down from the craft were photographed. So skeptics came, claiming the photos were faked. Even MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, gave Ed a different type of camera meant to make faking pictures harder. Ed was able to get these photos with any camera that was given to him. Physicist Dr. Bruce Maccabee actually verified Ed Walters' photos as legitimate, and I was even able to speak to him for this video. Ed made an initial $200,000 on a book he wrote about his experience. He made an additional $400,000 by selling the TV and film rights in the case. And that was just the beginning. The story takes a turn when a model of a UFO was found inside the attic of a house that Ed Walters used to own. Critics rave that Ed Walters faked the story in order to gain wealth. Ed claimed on multiple occasions that he knew nothing about the model, and that even if he were trying to perpetuate a hoax, he would not have been stupid enough to leave it behind. Regardless, it was enough for most people to discredit him and discredit the sightings. But what about the hundreds of other witnesses, most of which did not even know Ed Walters? In this video, we're going to revisit the Gulf Breeze UFO sightings in a way you've never seen before. One of the first things I wanted to do was find the alleged photos taken by Ed Walters, but I had a really hard time finding the collection of photos in any sort of chronological order. I was fortunate enough to be able to talk to Dr. Bruce Maccabee, who did the photo analysis of the pictures for Ed Walters' book. He's an optical physicist that worked for the US Navy that claims the photos are legitimate. I was hoping Dr. Maccabee would be able to point me in the right direction to find all of the original photos in the order that they were taken. Most of what I've been able to find has just been online, and it's hard for me to distinguish when they were taken, if they were taken by him, if they were recreations. So I'm trying to find something a little bit more concrete as far as what is Ed's photos and when they were taken.
Take your camera and go to the library and photograph the pictures that are in the book. The highest quality copies we get are probably in that book.
Bruce told me I needed to find a copy of the hardcover book because the photos are in there, they're in color, and it's probably the clearest quality I'll get, as opposed to the paperback where the photos are still there, but they're all in black and white and not nearly highest quality. So that's what I did. So right now I'm on my way to the public library. I looked up to see if they had a copy of Ed Walters' book. I ordered one, but it was from a used seller, and it won't be here for a few more weeks. So I'm gonna try to see if they have a hard copy version. I'd also like to just thumb through it and see what all information might be in there that could be useful. It's a packed house here at the local library. It's always easy to remember where the library is because of this giant water tower that's right next to it. Even after I got here, they told me that they didn't have a copy of it, even though I looked it up online. Might be separate. As I looked up one, and it said that there was there, so I came here. I might have come to the wrong one. Could have swore that was the library I looked up before I drove down here. Yeah, I'm on their actual website. The guy say it's not here. I'm showing it right here. I don't know if you can see my West Florida Public Library. I'm gonna have to go back in. Let's try again. Okay, you said it's just like a reference? Gotcha, okay. Got my license there still? Thank you. So after going back in to make things right, because I found it on their site, they said that it's not at this branch, it's at the genealogy branch, and that it's a reference book only, meaning I can't check it out. Which is a good thing to know, because I at least upgraded my library card to this Toy Story one. Toy Story. So I literally walked back in, got a library card, and did not get a book. And cannot get the book I want. So I'm doing a great job. Anyway, next stop, I'm gonna go to that library. Even though I can't check it out, I'm still gonna try and take some pictures of the pictures in the book. Hopefully it's hardcover. We'll see. Oh, 3 cars in the parking lot. Let's see if they're open. I'm looking for a book I was referred to here, a book called the Gulf Breeze Sightings. Hardcover too. So how do reference books work? Am I able to take pictures of them? Am I able to?
You can make pictures of copies or whatever.
So the good news is I was able to track a hardcover copy of the book. When I was buying my copy off of Amazon, which still hasn't arrived yet, the cheapest hardcover copy I found was like $700. I'm actually gonna look it up now to see if that's changed. The only hardcover copy I could find is $768. So luckily this library had one. And when I get my copy of the book, I'll at least be able to tell when it was taken, which camera it was also taken with. I'll try and map out exactly the pictures that were taken in order and try and replicate those shots later. I was able to get all the photos I needed from the book. Still not ideal from taking pictures from my phone, but at least I had something. And after all that, my paperback copy came in the mail, except it wasn't paperback. They actually sent me the hardcover copy of the book. This is one of the few times the incorrect Amazon details actually benefited me. This worked out because I was able to take high quality scans at my house instead of relying on the photos I took from my cell phone. And since I received the book, I did read it and I found it very interesting. I want to tell Ed's story the way that he writes it without bias. I want you to hear his side of the story before we go into anything else. On November 11th, 1987, Ed Walters tells the story of how he saw a light moving behind pine trees while he was looking outside of his west-facing window. He went out his door and he saw a UFO. He rushes back inside to grab his Polaroid camera that he frequently uses at his job sites and snaps 5 photos. He then tells this fantastic story of how the UFO came over him, shot down a blue beam of light all over his body that paralyzed him temporarily, and started speaking to him telepathically. Calm down. Stop it. Ed began to levitate off the street. He attempted to scream, but there was no sound. The voice in his head changed from male to female, and then he began to see the images of dogs. Suddenly, the blue beam stopped, dropped him onto the ground. A strange experience to be sure, and one that he recounts as experiencing all alone. No witnesses, but he did have the 5 photos. He considered sending the pictures to the Gulf Breeze Sentinel, a local newspaper in the city, without using his name, but after discussing it with his wife, he decided against it. November 17th, 1987, Ed decides to go ahead and send his pictures into the Sentinel, but remain anonymous by using the alias Mr. X. Since Ed was the one turning in the pictures, if asked, he would just say that he was Mr. X's friend. November 19th, 1987, the Sentinel runs the story. These Polaroid photos were taken from the front yard of a Gulf Breeze resident Wednesday evening, November 11th. If anybody saw it or knows any information regarding this, please contact the Sentinel. November 20th, 1987, Ed begins to hear a hum in his ear. He starts hearing that UFO voice again, but this time, it's in an African dialect. While this is happening, Ed goes outside and sees the UFO. He shouts at it, to leave him alone. A voice responds, saying, "Be calm, step forward." Another voice in Spanish says, "Los fotos son prohibido." He snaps his photos. He describes hearing a conversation on board the ship from a female saying, "You can't expose them. They won't hurt you. It's just some tests. That's all." Ed, our valiant hero, was defiant, shouting, "What gives you the right to suck people up into your ship?" Suddenly, Ed begins to see naked women. As Ed recalls, these were not drawings of naked women, but actual naked women. Big women, little women, fat, black, white women from every race and every age. There were even pregnant women. The voice tells Ed, "We will come for you." November 25th, 1987, 5 witnesses come forward saying they saw something in the sky. These 5 people have no connection with each other and report seeing the same object at different times. One of these witnesses claims to have seen the UFO 1 hour after Ed's alleged levitating experience. Here's an account of another witness that claimed to have seen the UFO on November 11th.
Charlie Summerby and his wife Doris saw this object last November. Charlie, if you could tell us what you saw.
Well, it was right after sunset over East Bay. We saw this circular object. It was bluish gray in color and with light shining out through portholes. And the really amazing thing was there was no sound.
It was November 11th at 8:10 in the morning. A UFO came within 400 feet of me at treetop level. I noticed 2 military jets were following it about 2 air miles. The UFO shot up at a 45-degree angle and waited for the jets to approach a little closer, and then in an instant it just shot straight up.
December 2nd, 1987. Here's where the story gets a little bit weirder. Ed writes about hearing a conversation in his head in Spanish about a baby. A female and a male converse about why they were only given bananas and that they need to keep their voice down or else they'll hear you. Ed says he walks outside and sees a UFO in the distance before it moves right in front of him at illogical speeds. The UFO tells Ed to walk forward. Ed, being defiant, says no, has his Polaroid in one hand and his gun in the other. As Ed lifted his hands, the UFO began to back off and disappear, but not before Ed was able to grab this photo. Ed's wife now walks out and is able to see the UFO take off vertically. Later that same night, at about 3:30 in the morning, Ed reaches for the draw cord of one of his blinds and lifts it up. On the other side of the glass, Ed sees a small, 4-foot-tall little creature. Ed runs out the door to beat the crap out of this thing when he's struck with that blue beam again. The blue beam eventually lets him go. The UFO trails off, shoots another little blue beam down, before disappearing altogether. Ed believes the second blue beam was actually picking up the other little creature. Ed gave an account of what this little dude looked like. It's kind of a boxy looking guy with this silver rod of some kind. December 3rd, 1987. The Sentinel gets a picture from an unnamed person dating back to June of 1986, a full year before Ed's initial experience. This person claims they never released the photos because they didn't want to be seen as a crackpot until Ed came forward with his photos. Also, several other witnesses begin to come forward. December 4th, 1987, MUFON begins an official investigation. December 5th, 1987, a different craft appears behind the tree line and begins to talk to Ed. "Do not resist. Stay where you are. You are in grave danger. We will not harm you. Zejas, we have come for you." Ed refuses firmly. He snaps a pic and the UFO bails. December 10th, more witnesses come forward to the Sentinel. December 17th, Ed wakes up in the middle of the night with 3 dark figures standing in his room. As he gets up to attack them or defend himself, a sharp pain begins to happen in his head. His wife is also there that corroborates this. The creatures bail. Ed looks out the window, sees the UFO. He charges out, grabs his camera, grabs his gun. As he runs out, he snaps another photo. The UFO begins to slowly move away, and from Ed's point of view, seems as though the UFO is having some sort of mechanical issue. He snaps a few more photos. December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, Ed goes outside to turn his pool filter on, and he sees 3 UFOs lingering above him. The Sentinel also received a few more photos from an anonymous source known as Believer Bill, who took pictures of the same craft. Believer Bill had his photos shown right next to Ed's in the next issue of the Sentinel. December 28th, Ed shoots a video of this UFO flying behind the tree line near his house. January 12th, 1988, the photo that's probably most famous that's associated with this case. Ed is working on a construction site, double-checking the AC for the following workday, when a UFO comes down to street level. A white light struck Ed while he was in his truck. paralyzing him, making him immobile. He reports an intense pins and needle feeling in his arms. Ed attempts to sort of reach his shotgun in the back seat, but since he had no feeling in his arm, he couldn't grab it. He sort of guided his hand to the Polaroid camera next to him, and with great difficulty was able to snap the infamous photo. Ed was able to get out of the truck with his camera slung around his body and trailing and dragging his shotgun behind him. The UFO speaks to Ed, demanding him to come forward. The UFO then shoots down 5 blue beams, each time depositing a little creature onto the road, each one with a glowing silver rod that he had seen before. Ed gets back into his truck with very little feeling in his arms and is able to skedaddle. Over the course of 3 more months, Ed would have several more sightings. On one occasion, January 21st, 2 men from MUFON agreed to actually stay outside of Ed Walters' home. These 2 men would work in 2 12-hour shifts, and they would take turns staking out Ed Walters' house for any activity. They did this for 9 days. They gave Ed a walkie-talkie in case he began to hear anything or see anything to radio over to one of them in the car. January 21st, Ed begins to hear a hum in his head, radios over to the guy in the car, but unfortunately, he didn't see anything. Bob Reed was his name, the MUFON rep that was outside, reports only seeing an airplane. January 24th, Ed takes a man named Dwayne Cook, the publisher of the Gulf Breeze Sentinel, to go out with him to try and track down one of these UFOs. While driving down Highway 98, Ed reports an intense pain began happening in his head, so much so that he thought his eyeball was going to pop out of its socket. Ed pulls over to Soundside Drive, which is where the infamous road UFO shot was taken, in an attempt to lure the UFO out. He wrote that Dwayne Cook actually filmed this experience on camera, but Ed ended up getting out of the car, screaming at the top of his lungs in the middle of the road, "Why won't you just leave me alone? Show yourself." As Ed was screaming this with such intensity, he looked over behind Dwayne, snapped a photo. As Dwayne turned away, it immediately winked out. While Dwayne didn't get to see the UFO himself, he did witness Ed Walters snap the photo. Dwayne said, "I know one thing. I saw you shoot this picture. And this is the picture I saw you pull out of the camera, and I peeled it." There is no online record of this video between Dwayne and Ed that I was able to find. Several more encounters with the UFO were reported by Ed. The UFOs also continue to refer to him as Zehas and telling him, "We're here for you," and "In sleep you'll know." Around this time, Ed begins to look into regressive hypnosis that might reveal anything else to him. Perhaps something in his subconscious memories. February 7th, the UFO chases Frances, Ed's wife, and shoots a blue beam down at her, which she's barely able to escape. Ed was able to snap this photo. February 10th, Ed is given a brand new camera by MUFON, a Nimslo 3D camera. This camera would be internally locked so that if anybody tried to go inside to touch or mess with the film, it would be noticed. The MUFON investigators used this camera for the specific purpose of making it impossible for Ed Walters to fake. As Ed states, "I faced a dilemma. I had been hoping the UFO would get out of my life. Now I had to pray that it would return for at least one more photograph." During this time, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, a physicist, would begin his photo analysis in the case. Ed is also encouraged to take a polygraph test in regards to the pictures. Ed complies and completes 2 polygraph tests over the course of 4 days. The conclusion? With the information that is available to this examiner at this time, it is felt that Mr. Walters truly believes that the photographs and personal sightings he has described are true and factual to the best of his ability. February 26th, Ed uses the MUFON camera to take pictures of lights in the sky. The photos were revealed during a press conference in public. They were hard to see and didn't reveal much, but it was implied it was a large object way in the distance, possibly a mothership. After this, Ed went out and bought a new Polaroid with the intention of having a camera that's more difficult to double expose, the easier it is to prove that the photos were legitimate. Shortly after buying the camera, he experiences the UFO again and snaps this photo. March 20th, the familiar hum and Zehas, "In sleep you'll know," begins to ring through Ed's ears. Ed went outside with yet another camera rig. This camera rig had 2 cameras on one device. They would take a photo at the same time. This would also help triangulate the distance of the object and the size of it. Critics and debunkers are heavily invested at this point. Ed describes these people as only using half-truths with the intention of discrediting him as a person because they aren't able to disprove his photographs. And while all this is happening, Ed has been working on his regressive hypnosis, and those 3 events of missing time slowly become more clear to him. These 3 events were as follows. At age 17, Ed sees an alien face above him while he's sleeping. He yells for his brother Bert. Bert, who is then awakened, Tries to rationalize with Ed that it was probably just his cat. However, there were wet footprints that lead from outside and into Ed and Bert's room. There were several small tracks showing several coming and goings, most of them going to Ed's room. Bert had noticed that Ed was wet, but he hadn't been outside. The second event, Ed is now aged 25. He's driving down the road and sees a light shoot past him. The light begins to circle him and Ed pulls off to the side of the road. To his perspective, this happened very quickly, but several hours of time are now missing. The third event, Ed is now aged 33. He's out canoeing one day when he hits a large metallic object that slowly begins to glow green. Bubbles begin to come out from the water. The current or some other force begins to draw him closer to the center of this glowing phenomenon. Suddenly, he finds himself lying down in his canoe. He's much closer to shore, but several miles away. Hours had passed. Finally, Ed believes the first night of this experience, back in November 11th, he was abducted and his memory was wiped. May 1st, Ed goes down to the Soundside Beach to confront the UFO. At some point while he's there, he begins to hear it and snaps these two photos with his SRS camera rig. He reports his hand smelling bad with some sort of black residue or particles underneath his fingernails. He saves these particles for later. His face is bruised, and about an hour and 15 minutes had passed with him having no recollection of what had happened. That was the final sighting in Ed's book.
There was a thing on the news about that guy, and there was about
Ed Walters, yep.
About a little cardboard model of a spaceship that they found in the wall of a house that he lived in, and this kid was on there saying that he'd hired him to take lights and do it, and they showed, her and I both saw it. They showed how they could do the video thing of it and make it look like it was a real thing. Well, if he's out there doing it, sure 200 people are gonna see it. I mean, they had the little cardboard model with all the little holes and the little booster thing on the bottom and everything else, and they found it in the wall of his house.
One of the things that I see brought up the most online to try to discredit the photos is the UFO model that was found in his house. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
He bought another house, moved out of the one that he had been in. There was a door into the house. It was in the garage area. And very often the garage doors would be left open so that real estate agents could show the house. The house had been empty for quite a while. The book was published in 1990. September of 1989 that Menzer moved into the house. And then after some days or weeks after moving in, Menzer decides he wants to connect up his ice-making refrigerator to the water system. Somehow a pipe gets to the back of inside the wall and comes sticking out. He said that the pipe stuck out and was bent and crimped so that water couldn't leak out the end of this pipe. There must be a valve somewhere that they can turn the valve off without shutting off the whole house. And since it's not down in the basement, it must be up in the attic. He goes up into the attic and he finds floor joists, and between the floor joists is a thrown and blown in insulation, or loose insulation, whatever. He starts moving the insulation. Instead, as he's going along, lifting the insulation, up pops this model UFO that's just lying there covered up with insulation. He never finds a pipe with a valve on it. He finds this model. He knew something about the stories associated with the house, and he thought, well, maybe the guy who lived here before made a model to show his friends or something like that.
Yeah.
Menzer said he didn't really think much of it. He leaves the model on a shelf in the garage, and he's no longer thinking about it. Some number of weeks later, a reporter comes to the front door.
Unprompted? Just a random reporter just showed up?
I can't say the guy's name. He wrote a book about his experience.
The book he's talking about is called War of the Words, the true but strange story of the Gulf Breeze UFO, and I actually picked up a copy myself after I had this conversation with Bruce.
The reporter asked, have you seen any UFOs? No. Have you seen any pictures of UFOs lying around? No. Have you found any models? Well, now that you mention it,
yeah.
Yes, I found a model in there.
Upon reading War of the Words by Craig Myers, who is a former Pensacola News Journal reporter, he gives the exact same account on page 111. Found something like what? Mr. Menzer said. Well, first of all, what about a UFO? I asked, only half laughing. No, I can't say we have, Mr. Menzer said. Okay, what about any photographs laying around? No. Books about UFOs, photography, unexplained phenomenon? No. Photographic equipment, darkroom supplies? Can't say we have. Any models of UFOs? Well, we did find something the other day, Mr. Menzer said. I'll get it. We found this a few weeks ago. Can I see that? I asked. I recognized it immediately. I had seen it in my feverish, restless dreams and nightmares for months. There was no mistaking it. It was the Gulf Breeze UFO. He reports going to Mr. Menzer's house only weeks after Mr. Menzer himself found the model and asks him outright if he found a model in the house. I'm not saying that to discredit him, but it is extremely coincidental.
Anyway, they invited Ed to come to the office and discuss the sightings and the forthcoming book. And while he's there, they whip out the model. Have you ever seen this before? Did you make this? And so on. And of course, he's completely flabbergasted. He's never seen the model before.
The prank that was pulled by putting a model in a house that I used to live in a year and a half ago was an effort by whomever to discredit the sightings. And it shows me that there is a very definite cover-up going on trying to make this phenomena go away. And any big case that happens across the United States will be ridiculed. And I've heard these same stories, unsubstantiated stories about models and witnesses coming forward over and over, and there's no truth to them. Hundreds of people in Gulf Breeze are testifying to seeing this thing. Now, if you want to believe I'm a faker or a trickster, then you also have to somehow or another convince all these other people who are saying they see the same thing that they are also hosters and tricksters.
Howard, do you want to say?
I knew I had to track this model down. I needed to see it for myself. From what I was able to research, it was now in possession by the T.T. Wentworth Museum in Pensacola. I recalled them having this really cool science fiction display a few years back, so I figured if it was going to be anywhere at the museum, it was most likely going to be there. There used to be this science fiction area on the 3rd floor, which is where I was thinking was the most likely place for the model to be, but it has since been renovated to a music sort of portion, so I have no idea where to even look for it now, if it's still here. I read in the Pensacola News Journal back in 2017, y'all got that little UFO model from the Gulf Breeze Sightings. Remember back in like 1987? UFO. Do y'all still have that, or would you know where it may have been moved if you don't? I thought it might have been in the science fiction area that was on the 3rd floor. But it's not there anymore.
The exhibit, yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So we came to a bit of a dead end. She said that they used to have it, but they've since got rid of it. But she gave me the contact information of the people that might have it in the UWF Historic Trust archive. So I'm going to try and give them a call and see if there's any way if I can see it for myself.
Sorry, the number you called was busy. Please try again later. Sorry, the number you called was busy. Sorry, the number you called was busy. Sorry.
All right, I'm just gonna have to shoot them an email and hopefully somebody gets back to me. Holden, Hardman, sent. It is a few hours later and luckily I did get a response from them. The article you read is about the most information we have as well. Sometimes we put that item on display in our It Came From the Vault exhibit, which we pull some of our more unique items for public viewing. Luckily for you, it is actually on display right now, not at that museum. It is currently on loan to the UFO's Mini Golf on Pensacola Beach. I just got to make sure that the mini golf place is open, but apparently that's where it's at, this UFO-themed mini golf course on Pensacola Beach, so that's going to be our next stop to try and see it. The Historical Society told me that these guys have it on loan for the foreseeable future, so they should have the model here. We're also going to try and mirror the shot to see if it fits exactly to the pictures that were taken. So we'll see. We might also play a couple rounds of mini golf while we're here. I was told that you guys have the UFO model from the Ed Walters stuff. Oh, there it is. UFO model consisting of 2 styrofoam plates attached by a strip of drafting paper. The model was found in the attic of Ed Walters' Pensacola home shortly after he moved. Walters claimed to have sighted UFOs in the air during the 1980s, on loan with the UWF Historic Trust. Oh look, they have a couple of Sentinel things too. Would there be any way for me to move the glass box so I could take pictures around it? Would that be okay or allowed? We're trying to see if it's viable to get it out so that we could take the pictures to create a 3D model of it. So close, but so far. We've traveled many miles. All right, we'll try. We'll just do it with the pictures then. So here's one of the later models. This one obviously looks much different. So I want to go to the first generation. This little light up top thing. So notice in these, there's little holes there where I guess light is supposed to come out of. So it's strange that the little small rectangular ones are just sort of colored in. Yeah, I noticed they're only on one side as well.
Yeah, it's the same shape and everything, but I don't see how, like the bottom, I could see light getting through that and it spilling out, but from the bottom, it's like 2 styrofoam plates put down. The light would not come through the way it is on the photo. Like on the photo, it comes out the same as on the top. The lights in the bottom and the top are almost similar brightness.
They have Star Wars pinball.
This is one of the things I talked about Bruce Maccabee with, about how double exposuring this would be particularly difficult using that Polaroid camera he had, because the tree is in front of the model.
Double exposure is something that happens when you take a picture and you don't advance the frame. I see the Gulf Breeze photograph, bing, and of this flying lampshade or whatever it is on this desolate road, and I think one thing, bing, double exposure. Boom, taking 2 pictures without advancing the frame. It's just a double freaking exposure.
What is it about the Ed Walters photos that gives you the impression it was not a double exposure?
When I went there, I created a double exposure. When I pulled the tab out, I got this double exposure image, which looked like there was some glowing object hovering in the sky. The point is that he didn't give any indication of realizing what I had done.
From what I'm hearing from you is you went out there, you recreated you tried to do a double exposure using his camera, but from your reaction from him, it seemed as though that was the first time he was seeing that being done.
He acted as if he thought it was a real picture of a real UFO that was really up in the sky there, and I had taken a picture of it.
Oh, I see.
He didn't act like he knew what was going on.
Yeah, so he thought that it had come back and you just happened to grab a picture of it.
Right. That's the way he acted.
But the first photo, the left-hand side of the object was blocked by some of the branches of the tree. And you can't do that in a simple double exposure. You have to get very accurate registration between, say, the edge of the tree and where the edge of the object is being blocked by the tree.
There's also little holes in here, it looked like, to help light shine kind of through the middle.
And that's not in the photo. Yeah, that's not, there's no light there at all.
I'm inclined to agree is that it's about 80 to 90% accurate, which is one of the reasons I wanted to see if we could get a 360-degree digital model.
80 to 90% similar to the what is shown in the pictures.
Right.
But not identical. No picture shows that model.
I have examined the model. It is made from a vellum drawing that has Ed Walters' handwriting on it. Ed claims that drawing was not made until 1989. The investigation by the mayor shows, well, this was the photo that Ed likes to compare with the model is actually a 3rd generation UFO model.
Okay, can you get a shot of this on the monitor? Oh, you got it over
there. But if you think this model looks anything like the photographs of what the people around Gulf Breeze are seeing, then you need to have some glasses.
It was also found with schematics from a housing project that Ed was working on. So they're like, oh yeah, these go together. But the schematics were for a year after Ed had already moved out of the house. So that means that he would have moved out, had the schematics, went back to his house, his old house that he didn't live in anymore, and went and hid them up in the attic, which doesn't make sense, along with the fake UFO, which that's a piece of evidence someone's going to leave behind. And on close inspection, you can see that they might look similar, but they are not the same craft.
Let me ask you, do you believe in UFOs? What do you think about the model in the Ed Walters? Do you know about it, really?
I did.
Do you believe in UFOs? No. So we got a believer and a non-believer.
I moved here a year ago, and that's like the first thing I heard when I got here.
Never seen anything? Not convinced?
I don't believe in like the supernatural stuff. Yeah. I've never seen something. I don't believe anything I don't see. So
sure. There are all these witnesses say they saw that, but then they find the model, and then, so I don't know. Anyway, we're gonna go play some golf. that Tiger Woods documentary, so I might have the upper hand here. Good news is that we were able to find the model. Bad news is that we couldn't get it out of the glass case, so we can't create a full 360-degree version of it. We might try to do what we can with just the one side, because only one side actually had the portholes and stuff, so it would only be from the vantage point that we could see that the model would actually be there. But we still have to go find the locations of the original sightings, which we'll do tonight, and really I just want to go to the spots where they allegedly landed. So I'm looking forward to doing that. More golf. We're going to take one of our drones up to try and match the shot of where the UFO would have been to see that vantage point. I heard that Ed Walters' place is in a gated community, so we might have to wait for somebody to go through and piggyback off of them. We're going to make real sketchy decisions. Have you seen any UFOs around here?
Yeah, I have.
You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, I'm looking at two of them right here. No, dude, if you look on Google, it says this is the UFO capital of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, you know the story of that deal?
Yeah, Ed Walters, yeah.
Okay, well then you know that. You know, and I don't know what that was all about. There's a lot of stuff going on around here in the you know, with the Air Force and Navy.
Yeah.
No telling.
That is true. There's a lot of.
You know, I know the government flies stuff that we don't know about.
Yeah. So have you seen anything out here yourself or not really?
No, never seen anything, man.
Yeah,
Don't mean you can't see it though.
So this is a big loop, so it's got to be on one of those streets. We went in this direction. If we go in the other direction, we might also see the curve. It's a sharp turn there.
Yeah, curves and sharps.
The actual house that he lived at was not like super like upper class. It's more of what I was expecting. Kind of this like middle class housing here. We read that the house that Ed Walters used to live in is in this gated community on this street. When we just went there, that's the only house that's in that gated community. So I think that it's on one of these houses.
That house is worth $6.8 million.
Yeah, that was definitely not him. That might be the house right there for all I know. Need to be. Excuse me. Is this Ed Walters' old house?
The guy you did the Zoom call.
Oh yeah.
He was talking out in front of it.
Maybe Bruce can give me the address. This is our third attempt to try and find the location of where the UFO landed. The last time we came out here, I actually brought my girlfriend Jen with us, but it was raining, so we had no visibility, and traffic was backed up all the way to Pace, Florida, because the main bridge that connects Gulf Breeze and Pensacola was destroyed during Hurricane Sally, and they haven't repaired it. So it's been more difficult for us to actually get out here physically. But after researching, Prime was able to find the actual location. We weren't even in the correct area from when that was happening. I think that I found Ed Walters' house, which we'll go visit right after this. But in the meantime, we have found the location, where we believe to be the location of the famous shot from Ed's truck, where he was looking at it and the light is shining down onto the road. Let's go look. So there's a symbol here on the road that we were looking at that we think is where marks the spot that the UFO landed. The issue that we were running into is that this curvature looks the same from each vantage point. They're both curving to the left depending on where you're looking. Prime and I were sitting here for probably a good 10-15 minutes looking at it and looking at the pictures, and we think that Ed was on this side of the road looking up. So we think that he was way over here in the back and the UFO would have landed. I think from the picture that it actually looks closer to where those two trucks are as opposed to where that symbol is. But we'll check out both. It looks closer to where those trucks are, in my opinion. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna get the tripod, we're gonna try and recreate the vantage point of Ed Walters' truck, and I'm gonna have Prime get the drone out, and we're going to get the vantage point of the UFO looking back this way. To say, you know, if there was a UFO that was flying at that level, looking at Ed Walters, why maybe that particular area. So we're gonna get to see from the perspective of the UFO.
It's the only area that had landing clearance.
Yeah, that's right. There's our UFO. It actually looks like it's on the incoming traffic lane.
Kind of just after the turn, right? See, here's us down over here.
Let's bring it low. down to street level-ish. Obviously, I don't want to get hit by a car. That's right, even right there is roughly where it was. Anything in there that's, so we are right where Ed would have been. So, oh my gosh. Yeah, that's roughly where the bottom of it would have been according to the picture.
You can still see the tree line over the top of it. So it's really not big.
Yeah, it's not huge.
It fits on a road.
So here's what the book says. On January 12th, 1988, this UFO came from behind me as I drove to one of my construction sites. That's why it's not anywhere near his house, because that's where we were looking before. I passed over the truck and a white flash flooded through the windshield and numbed my arms. My truck went out of control. I managed to stop at the side of the road and saw this UFO was now blocking it. My arms were stinging, but I managed to shoot this photo before I crawled beneath the truck to avoid another strike of the white flash. 5 beings then deposited onto the road. According to his book, he's saying that 5 aliens essentially came out of the craft as well.
That's why it landed so close to him, and then they got
out, according to him. So next, we're gonna go to his house. I would say go ahead and just shoot it up, and we'll see if there's anything significant. We're 267 feet high now. You can see pretty much the whole road, and I'm just trying to make sure, does it even make logical sense why the UFO would have been in this area? In Gulf Breeze, all the UFO sightings are pretty much over that bay, so we're right next to it. I mean, nothing stands out to me right away as to why it would have picked this spot. So I actually totally forgot, but Prime actually recreated the model. The only actual difference is, I think, that I was able to notice was the top is just a little thinner than in the actual model that we found at the golf course. So other than that, this is pretty dang close to it. So we were joking around, we're like, well, let's try and just sort of recreate with our model since we couldn't get the actual one.
Yeah, it's just a couple paper plates, the styrofoam plates, and construction paper around the side that I drew on. I kind of got tired of using a ruler and making straight lines, so I'm like, yeah. And what's kind of weird too is it's not a perfect circle. It's almost like flaring out this way, like it's coming into land and it's shooting the light reflecting off the road.
Like the propulsion is pushing towards the camera a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually come a bit closer to me, a significant amount, I would say, and walk in towards me actually a little bit. I know to you you're not a little bit that way, and bring it down a smidge, a good bit, right there. Give yourself a step back. Can you tilt it? Kind of, yeah, just like that. Perfect. Hold there. That's tough, man. Recreating it ourselves. Granted, I'm using a technique that they wouldn't have had back then, but it's not a big stretch to say they could have figured something out aside from doing it digitally, because that's pretty dang close. What sells that image is the light on the road, which I'm not sure how they would have done at the time. But that's what gives it that depth. That's what makes it look far away and so big. I don't know, man. As we were leaving, we spoke to a resident that lived right alongside that street. He moved into the house in 2016 and told us he wasn't familiar with the story.
I don't want to be on film.
Okay,
if
no
that's
problem.
All right.
That's all right.
No, because
he said he didn't want to be on camera, but did agree to talk with us. We asked if he had ever seen any UFOs or anything weird while living there. That was 1988. That particular picture. But you have not seen any UFOs living here.
I have not. No.
Okay.
Not that I've been looking.
Yeah.
Now you say stuff like that, and I'm not even gonna bring it. I mean.
No, tell us. Tell us.
My kids and I were out here playing, and
he then reluctantly tells us of a story of how his kids were playing outside one day when they saw green eyes from a nearby bush staring at them. He said he took a photo of it as well, which we didn't get the chance to see.
It was something that the kids like, man, what is that? And I was like, I don't know. Can't really tell what it is.
You literally happened to have moved right where that famous picture took place.
Now it all makes sense. It's okay.
Very weird.
Now me and my kids I'm gonna freak them out.
Yeah. So. He at least has noticed that somebody, I guess, periodically comes and fills in the little squiggly line where the UFO landed. But he told us he didn't see anything. He's never seen anything except for maybe some weird eyes in the bushes. He was hesitant to tell us that too. He was like, I don't know if I should say.
Well, he's like, well, that would explain this one time.
Yeah.
And he's like, never mind.
Recreating the shot ourselves really made me. I'm
more skeptical.
I'm much more skeptical because I went in like you. You know, I'm listening to Bruce Maccabee talk to me about it. There's the witness accounts. You know, I'm not opposed to the possibility, but seeing us do it even though I don't know how he would have done the reflection on the road at the time, doesn't mean he didn't. So I want to go check out the other locations. I still don't know at his house how he was able to get the tree in front of the UFO on a double exposure. I have no idea. That's not to say he didn't do it. So I'm leaning more towards, I'm skeptical about these pictures a little bit more now. It's one of those things that I feel like you really want to be true. Right. You want UFOs to have come to Gulf Breeze and, you know, it all to make sense. And I'm not even saying that it's not. That's not what happened. I'm still open-minded. It's just that moment for us recreating it was such a, oh man, it's so close. The Pensacola News Journal at the time, once the model was found in the house, recreated the images as well, or recreated similar images. But it was doing it myself that I'm like, oh man, that's hard. We're gonna go to his house now, and we're gonna try and find his other famous photo, the very first one, where the bush is in front of the UFO, which on a double exposure, it should be sort of translucent, transparent. That's another one. I would not know how he did that at the time. There's a low-flying UFO. We were finally able to find the house. I am gonna go try and talk to the owner of the house just to see if it's okay if we try and recreate some of the pictures kind of in their property, and hopefully that'll be okay. But I'm so happy that we were at least able to find it. My name's Holden Hardman. I'm a local YouTuber that does videos of the area. Yeah, that would be great. Yes, ma'am, that would be wonderful. Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you. So she had a Ring doorbell, and talked to her very briefly, and she said that she's actually on her way home now. So she said it would be fine and if we could just wait a minute and she'll come out here. We'll actually get to talk to her herself. Well, she didn't say she knew all about it, but she's very aware, okay. I guess, so we must not be the first that have come bugging her. The first day that we came out trying to find the property, the location we had was totally wrong. And it sent us to, it's kind of in the ballpark, but it was in the wrong area. Luckily for her, her whole house is not posted online. We're gonna reserve the privacy. We were just, we did some detective work. That's how we were able to find it. And she actually just pulled up, so she's home now. That's okay. We were just wanting to recreate some of the pictures because this was allegedly where everything was done. You get a lot of crazy people coming up asking about the house, don't you? Wow, okay. And just want to make sure you were comfortable with just strangers out in the yard and everything. Have you ever seen any UFOs? Nothing? So do you think that the photos were hoaxed? Yeah, for sure. Was it y'all that found the model, or was that somebody else?
It was an older couple.
I appreciate you dealing with us. So. I did ask in the most awkward way possible if we could film the attic where the model was found, but the owner politely and understandably declined allowing us inside. All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So it's no-go on the attic. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah,
at least
that would have been a little, especially during...
I know, but you know, shoot your shot, I guess. Okay, so this is the closest I think I can get. I don't know if this little piece of the house was there at the time, but that's roughly where the pole was. We've had several hurricanes since this happened. Our model doesn't look exact. It looks like in the original one, it's kind of wider. Literally in the other picture we took, it's not far from where the camera actually is, that it could be faked or recreated.
It's both off, I feel like, because even the actual model that was found that supposedly he used to mock these photos with, it doesn't look exact. The same.
Yeah.
It looks different. It's got a wider base. There looks like there's like a second row of this down below it.
Some of the pictures look like an entirely different model as well. And then there's the photos where there's like 3 of those that I don't know how you do with a double exposure, unless, I mean, people will just say that he created multiple models, which would make sense, I guess.
And just got rid of them all except for the one that happened to be found. The model that I made is modeled after the model that was found in the attic, which either modeled of the sightings or what was used to doctor the footage. But that's where we run into, it doesn't look like any photos that I've seen.
Yeah, at least not exact, but not quite 100%.
Yeah, it's just, it looks more thick than what this one kind of is.
Yes, that looks pretty close to photo 5, actually, kind of that same level. It's a little higher in the picture, but we took the drone up to get the vantage point of where the UFO would have been. There is kind of a cool feeling that if this story is true, we're seeing what the UFO would have been seeing. We also wanted to see the backyard where several pictures had been taken, where the blue beam almost hit Ed's wife, and where the small alien was outside Ed's window. We were making good progress, but we needed more information. We're here at Gulf Breeze City Hall to try and find the original articles in the Gulf Breeze Sentinel of where Ed Walters' pictures were originally published. I read online that they've all been archived here, so we're gonna see if we can find them. And we'll just go and hunt them down.
So what it was the USA Today bought that paper, and then they threw the archives in a dumpster. So I went and rescued them out of the dumpster and cleaned them up, and we kept them here for a couple of years. But at that point, they had gotten too damaged on the leather covers that they kept molding here. So I had to turn them over to an archive up in Milton who has better air conditioning control to keep the mold from growing. So if you want to see those archives, you have to make an appointment with Santa Rosa County Law Library to go see the archives, or you can go see them at the University of West Florida.
Okay. Oh, thanks for letting us know.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, appreciate it. That's okay. There's something about doing this project, this video, where we just keep getting run around. We end up finding stuff, but there's something about this one that they just keep giving us the runaround on. Yeah.
There's always
I need people to update their stuff online.
Hi, I was calling to see if you guys have the Gulf Breeze Sentinel in archive.
We called UWF and we were able to make an appointment to see the Sentinel papers. You said it's possible to have copies of the archive emailed to us, or like certain pages?
Yeah.
The publisher of the Gulf Breeze Sentinel was a fervent believer that those pictures were authentic. So they were very much kind of sensationalized and very much matter of fact. I remember the Pensacola News Journal had some reporters that heavily criticized the Sentinel for that, for not being, I guess, skeptical enough. So I wanted to see the articles myself. So I'll shoot them an email and see if we can get some copies of any articles from the Sentinel that would have covered the Gulf Breeze sightings. On our way to see the archives, running late. Hopefully we'll be able to get to take a look at everything and hopefully get some photo scans or something. You remember Elisa Land?
We got 86, 87, 87, then an 88 right there.
Wonderful. Any way to do like photo, can I take pictures?
You can take pictures. We can also do a scan for you if you need, but the pictures usually work just as good. That's what most people do. But if you need scans, let me know.
Let's take a look. Is there a specific way I need to handle the papers?
Here's what I do: is I'll sit with the papers out like this, and then you got the top somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Hand me the top right there. You got to get to your dates, right? You go like this.
Yeah.
And what I'll do is I'll just kind of flip it over like that. And you needed the end of 86?
87, the end of 87, which is in there. I saw 87.
Oh, okay. So there you go. I got you November 87 right here. There you go.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
No worries.
We've been having November 11th, 1987. There it is. Found it. Look at that. How cool. Oh, so neat. Polaroid photos were taken from the front yard of a Gulf Breeze residence Wednesday evening, November 11th. If anybody saw it or knows any information regarding the sighting, please contact the Sentinel. December 4th, 1987. Mother and son report seeing objects from a big bridge. I've pulled all the papers that had the UFO reports and stuff on it. He's photo scanning all of them and is going to email me high quality copies. So I'll have all of these Sentinel papers sent directly to me.
I think it's opaque.
Why?
Just looking at it, it doesn't look right. Even when you were looking at it, didn't you like just get that feeling of, ooh, that just does not look right? Not the fact that it was a UFO, but just did not look real. Something was off.
For our next step, we wanted to attempt to recreate the photos using more of a technique that Ed would have had available. Luckily, Polaroid-style cameras are making a comeback, so I was able to get my hands on an Instamax Mini 9 by Fujifilm. It's not Polaroid, but it's essentially the same thing. This model camera has no natural ability to do a double exposure, just like Ed's, so we had to be creative. We tried to find lights that Ed would have had access to back in the late 80s, and decided to use some pixie lights and battery-powered puck lights. There would have been equivalent items available back then.
Can I note that I worked 12 hours last night, and I'm just driving home. I'm like, can't wait to get into bed, and then Holden calls, and it's like,
UFO time. So maybe we could put the lights fixtures in and then lead it out the back.
Or I can just put now that I got this.
Yeah, you can put that in there too. It's hard to tell now with the light on, but it is glowing. This has got some weight to it. Do you think it'll pull that down?
No.
That's obviously it's very rinky-dink. We cut a hole at the bottom and placed the light inside and put the little power source in the main part of the model. So we're gonna try it like this and then put the other plate under it too, because on the actual model, this was enclosed, but we wanna get a couple of test shots in first. And here's our little model floating around.
Our boy Elroy.
All right, I'll get my other little camera.
It wasn't the string, it was the knot. I'm blaming your tying.
Back to the drawing board. We're back from the store, we got our supplies.
Surprise! Supplies!
Supply! We're gonna try again. I think we got it. We got the light shining at the bottom. We took a series of photos and really struggled to get the lighting just right. So it's very, very minimal. We're just really seeing that bottom light. So now we're gonna try with more light in the room, getting primarily the black background, and I'm seeing if that will help. We'll even, if I have to, get the flash back on too. We're just gonna play with it some. And it looks so far, like it looks much farther away here than when I'm taking it there. You can see it's just a very minimal amount of light. I'm the same distance away when I'm taking this picture, but this one is with the flash on. That's very strange. I'm not sure what the difference is there. Yeah, we can't do the flash because just like what we thought, it's shining on everything. After using more lights and just playing around with it in general, we were finally beginning to get the results that we were looking for.
This is reflecting.
You know,
that's eerie by itself already. That's like if I walked out in a clear night, no trees or anything, and just took a photo up, saw something hovering above me.
Once we were more confident with the images, it was time to try double exposures. I had to hold the physical back of the camera, snap a photo, and then physically prevent the film from ejecting. I had ruined a whole roll of film previously when I was practicing this on my own.
It's still operating, but he held it out just enough so that it doesn't catch and actually eject the film.
We were attempting different types of double exposures, but it wasn't dark enough outside for the white model to shine through. So we then decided to try double exposing just in his bedroom and got some pretty interesting results.
I think we got the exposure of the UFO pretty well down. If we got the light exposure on the UFO a little bit brighter and this darker,
it would mesh really well.
And I know that's doable.
These were two of our double exposures, one of which we were able to make look like some beams were shooting down near it.
Yeah, it's seeming like we're leaning, at least me, starting to lean more on the side of doctored photos, purposely taken. You kind of hope that this all just failed. Like there was like, there's no way we can do this. There's no way he could have done this. But granted, we're using modern technology.
Well, to some extent. I mean, we're trying to circumvent that to some degree. I couldn't imagine having like months in advance to play with it, you know, and to really get down a double exposure. There's still photos that he took that if they were doctored, I wouldn't know how he did them. We're still struggling with exposure on this camera. I don't know if on his Polaroid that was more movable. It's literally like a sun button, a home button, a cloudy day button, you know. The possibility that they could be doctored is becoming much more apparent. There's still things that I don't know how he would have done, like some of the pictures he took have this like streak of light to indicate it either moved up or moved down very quickly. I don't know if it could be just like, hey, I'm about to take the picture. Right as I snap, you just lower it quickly. You know, I don't know if that would give that appearance. There's options, there's trial things that you could do. One picture he took with Dwayne Cook, who was the Sentinel, one of the Sentinel publishers. He went out and Ed Walters started having this like, you know, the UFO is near, he can start hearing that hum in his head and the voice is coming to him. Ed Walters looks over the hood of his truck, sees the UFO, snaps a picture, says it's there. As Dwayne Cook turns and moves over, the UFO is gone. And then the little piece of film came out and it was on there, the UFO was there. You'd have to be talking about Ed Walters going through this elaborate ruse of taking a picture, the double exposure UFO picture way beforehand, acting essentially, going, oh my gosh, I hear this thing, holy cow, take a picture. and say, oh, it blinked out, and then you have physical proof. Hey, you were here with me, you saw me take the photo, you know, but it was just a double exposed picture way beforehand, possibly. We're talking about one of the pictures we took, one of the double exposures we took, and how you get these sort of weird, we're getting these weird like lines, things coming off that we wouldn't know. And so if I were trying to hoax this photo, I could say the UFO shot down these little beams of something, you know, and we would be none the wiser. And we took the photo, but I'm not quite sure what that even reflected off of.
Okay, let's go ahead and say that this is 100% hoaxed. All the photos were completely double exposure, whatever. That's still a lot of work he went through for this kind of thing. So the biggest troll of all time, if that's the fact, and the fact is that this wasn't, maybe we're wrong, and it just happened to be that we can recreate something that actually really happened.
That's possible, yeah.
That is still possible.
I saw the photos that were supposed to be, that were like sealed shut, waxed shut, and they look just like lines of light. It doesn't look like anything. I don't know what to make of that, but they weren't those types of photos. This is also a guy that had 2 children at the time, was married and was running his own business. All of that, the social, the business pressure, would to me be discouraging to try to hoax something like that that would just totally uproot your life. For what? Now granted, he did make money off of this later. He made an initial $200,000 on his book, plus another like $450,000 for like the rights for like a TV show a little bit later. So I mean, he profited, and that doesn't look good either. You know, he is a businessman working for himself. That's not to say that that means it's fake, just it doesn't look good. So there's all these different things that it's not clear cut. Either way, hoax or not, it's a crazy story, and only Ed Walters knows the truth.
Oh, here's another one right here. You see him? Flying right over our heads. Pointing it right at him. And now he's turning.
Ooh,
Yeah, you see him?
Yeah, it just flashed.
I'm lasering at him, and he's curving. Shit.
It's not even moving though, it's just staying there blinking.
When people say, do UFOs exist, they really mean to say, are UFOs extraterrestrial? People see UFOs all the time, they're just unidentified. Why would advanced beings capable of intergalactic travel care about us at all? We would be like cavemen to them. And now, even more mainstream media is acknowledging UFO phenomenon.
Well, the U.S. government is now acknowledging the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, what we often call UFOs.
There's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they moved, their trajectory.
President Obama says that there is footage and records of objects in the skies, these unidentified aerial phenomenon, and he says we don't know exactly what they are. What do you think that it is?
I would ask him again. Thank you.
Well, for decades, only crackpots and crazy people believed in UFOs. That's what I thought anyway. And then in recent years, it turns out that governments have been taking them seriously all along.
The U.S. government knows something unexplained is out there, and next month we may get answers. The Pentagon has until late June to tell Congress in an unclassified report what it knows about unidentified flying objects.
Well, enter Dr. Stephen Greer, a former ER doctor turned ufologist and founder of CSETI, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. His life's work now resides in bringing forth classified UFO documents from the government and disclosing them to the world. In 1993, he founded the Disclosure Project, a research project whose goal is to disclose to the public the government's alleged knowledge of UFOs, extraterrestrial intelligence, and advanced energy and propulsion communication systems. The Disclosure Project was founded in an effort to grant amnesty to government whistleblowers willing to violate their security oaths by sharing insider knowledge of UFOs. Why I'm bringing all of this up now is because Dr. Greer claims to have a way of making contact with extraterrestrials, and also claims that anyone can do it. He encourages you to bypass governments and independently make contact with alien civilizations on your own. The way to do this? Meditation. Greer claims these highly advanced beings are connected to a universal consciousness. That is to say, the entire universe is like a brain, and beings are like the neural link that are firing off at one another to communicate. We're all connected.
If consciousness and thought can affect something at a distance, what does that mean for us communicating with a civilization that is centered in the science of consciousness? Interstellar civilizations are using consciousness assisting technologies in all their travel and communication systems.
He claims that this is why in most cases of UFO or alien experiences, people report hearing voices or hearing things inside their head, just like Ed Walters does. Greer has claimed to have made contact with an alien civilization and worked together to create a protocol so that anyone on Earth, us, can make contact with them. Now, as weird and out of left field as this may seem, there may be some evidence to support it. People from all over the world have claimed to use this protocol and either seen things or filmed things in the sky immediately after. Things moving in strange ways or not moving at all, or zipping across the sky at lightning speeds. So, to me, trying to put away any personal bias, this seems like a time for science. My proposal is simple. We try to recreate these findings, as silly as it may seem. I think that going to Gulf Breeze, the UFO hotspot of the world, attempting this, and seeing if we get any results. So here's how the protocol works. Greer has provided us sounds to use to try and attract the UFOs. He encourages us to dispatch them through some form of radio wave, so we used walkie-talkies. Greer will then guide us through meditation, clearing our minds, making our intentions, our peaceful intentions, known, finding and inviting extraterrestrials to come visit us on Earth, and then vectoring them into our precise location on the planet, which means we'll have to know, kind of from an above view, where we geographically, physically are. He says the more people that are together to do this, the better the results, but says that it isn't necessary. You can do this on your own. And then we relax with open minds and allow the extraterrestrials to come visit us. It's hardly something we can measure, but we can still attempt the process. If other people are claiming to replicate this, surely we should be able to replicate it as well. This is known as the CE5 protocol, the close encounter of the fifth kind, which is human-initiated contact with extraterrestrials. So, if Ed Walters' aliens are in fact real, and they showed a huge interest in being in Gulf Breeze, perhaps we could contact them directly using the CE5 protocol. So, we set out to try to do this all on our own. We decided the best place to try would be Soundside Park. This is the place where Ed had his final UFO experience. I couldn't make it on the first night, so Prime went out there and attempted it by himself.
So what is CE5? Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. CE1, or Close Encounters of the First Kind, is sightings of an ET craft. Spot a UFO up there? That's a CE1 event. CE2, physical evidence of an ET craft. Burn marks, scorch marks. Then you got Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Now this is sighting of an ET life form. This isn't just seeing a UFO and or being able to touch it. This is now the inhabitants of that craft. Then you get even further. Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind. Experience on board an ET craft. So this is those people that claim to have been abducted. What we're going to attempt tonight is called CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, and this is human-initiated contact with ETs, right? They say experience has shown that ET civilizations respond very favorably towards correctly applied CE5 protocols, because as you practice CE5, you need to keep positive, peaceful intentions, and your progress with meditation improves. You will find it becomes increasingly effective both individually and in a group setting. I'm not saying I'm 100% one way or the other with it. I'm definitely open to believe. I'm definitely going to put in effort to try and meditate. This is going to be the first time. I'm already trying to settle my mind, but I'm in a park all by myself, and it is very creepy.
Unfortunately, no luck on that night with Prime.
Uneventful.
I also attempted to do it by myself, also so I could familiarize myself with the meditation process. I didn't film it, but that's okay because I didn't experience anything either. The third time, we would try again with our friend Matt as well. We returned to Soundside Park at 1 in the morning to try to encourage any UFOs out there to make themselves known to us, since most people would be sleeping at that hour. We're hearing some noises come from this general direction, so we think there might be an alien in the dumpster.
Yep. Hi. 5 of them.
There's something about being out here and just being in the open, vulnerable, out on this dock at 3 o'clock in the morning. We're gonna get set up and start our CE5 event, try and find some UFOs.
To sit silently, reflecting in this unbounded cosmic mind, should a thought or sensation or perception arise, acknowledge it and let it go.
It was cloudy and also began to rain. We picked a bad night, but it was one of the few nights that we were all available to do it. Even though we had no visibility of the stars, we do know that in some of these reported CE5 events, some UFOs would come below cloud level and even ground level. And after 3 hours of attempting this meditation and looking into the vastness of the universe, we saw nothing. Matt's a little upset that we dragged him out here, and the only thing that we saw was a couple of raccoons in a dumpster.
There were 5 raccoons in that dumpster. No, I did. I gave it a fair chance. I'm comedically being like, I don't want to be out here. I'm kidding. It was fun.
I was ready to pack it in there. We had given it a good try, but I know proponents of the CE5 protocol would say that we were operating in less than ideal circumstances. It's true, we didn't have a clear night. So instead of wrapping it up there, I did decide to do one more time on a clear night. So Prime and I together went out one last time to Navarre Beach, or rather this sort of middle spot between Pensacola Beach and Navarre Beach. It is the darkest place that we could find with minimal light pollution, and it being in the middle of the night, there was absolutely no one there. It was perfect. We had a couple of scattered clouds, but for the most part, it was pretty clear. I would be using my 360-degree camera to take long exposures throughout the night. I would set it in 1-minute increments, so the shutter would just be open, so if anything passed across the sky very quickly or very bright, it would pick it up even if it was too quick for us to see. At least that's the idea. So if any lights moved across the sky, the way the camera would input that data is just like a long streak in the picture. So in case we did miss anything in the sky, we could look back in the picture and see any lines that might be there. We set up and began. And at the end of our meditation, we saw something.
I can't tell if clouds are coming from below there. Yeah.
Oh, got it. Right there. Right there. Did you see it?
Oh my God.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I did. It just phased out.
It was a large, bright light that moved very slowly across the sky. I used Prime's laser pointer to point it out, so he was able to see it at the same time as well. I think we were just kind of in the moment because we got really freaked out initially, but we tried to kind of come back and have a level head about it. As the night moved on, we didn't see any more bright lights like that, but we did see several blue streaks, probably about 5 or 6 through the rest of the night. A couple we saw together, some in which only I saw, some in which only he saw. The first thing is we definitely saw things in the sky. There was no question about it, but nothing that couldn't have a rational explanation. For example, everything that we saw moved in a linear way. These could be, as you're probably guessing, naturally occurring shooting stars. The very bright light that we saw first together could have been a very large asteroid hitting the atmosphere and then disappearing. I was hoping we would have seen more unexplainable movement, you know, things moving, stopping, going up, moving at right angles, weird things like that. It would be harder for me to try to explain something like that away. Though it is still strange that I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I've seen a shooting star in my entire life. And then the night we attempt to do this, I see 6. I also went back and looked up to see if there was a possible meteor shower in that area at that time on that date, and there wasn't. Also, upon reviewing the long exposure shots, which I'll have available on my Patreon, there wasn't much in the way that we saw that night. We think some of the blue streaks we saw showed up and disappeared too fast to have accurately been captured on the camera, but we did catch this image in 2 separate shots. So each picture represents 60 seconds, a full minute of time elapsing. So this object would have had to have moved across the sky in 2 minutes. And Prime and I don't have any recollection of seeing this at all, even though we were staring up at the sky the entire time. So we didn't see this happen at all, which is also why we were surprised to see it in the long exposure shots. If you look closely enough, it is a series of dots, which suggests that it was blinking, which also means most likely an airplane or a helicopter. But then we notice that there's this parallel line that happens near the end or the beginning of it. If a helicopter was moving across the sky and then circled back, we would see that loop in the picture, but we don't. It's also only in these two photos. It's strange because we should be able to see the start of its point of origin and then the end of it, either going off or wherever it was supposed to go, but we don't. It just cuts off. Not only does it cut off, but it splits into two perfectly parallel lines. I don't know what that means because I definitely didn't see this, especially over the course of 2 minutes when we were out there. So I don't know. I don't know about that, but we were trying not to get too freaked out in the moment, but we were very, very excited. This is by far the most amount of anything we've seen in the sky from doing this. I don't know how to make of it, so I want to know your thoughts too, Prime, but the very first thing that we saw was that light that came across. I don't know how long it was in the sky, and we haven't had time to look at our pictures yet. Everything we saw was pretty linear, even if the very first thing to me was very, very bright. But after that, we both saw a couple other things. We saw one more thing together. Then after that, we're kind of just individual streaks, which were might have been shooting stars.
That first thing that you pointed out, I happened to be looking in that direction right as you said it and saw it. Kind of gets your blood going. You just want to see more. And then, yeah, I felt like right after that, we were like, oh. It's just truly amazing. The rest of the night, I just equate to, like you said, shooting stars. I don't know, I'm still definitely open. I want to see, I believe without seeing, I just want to do the seeing part at some point.
I don't really have an explanation about the long exposure shots. That's all I can say on those. Either way, we had no sighting of Ed Walters' UFO. So there are a few things involved in the case that I didn't get a chance to address earlier in the video, so I wanted to just briefly mention them here. The first is about a young man named Tommy Smith who claimed to not only have seen Ed Walters hoax these photos, but actively participated in hoaxing them. This boy was a friend of Ed Walters' son. He explained that Ed Walters took a trampoline and turned it over in the large field behind his house to account for that large ring of dead grass left by the UFO. The problem, because nothing in this case is straightforward, is that Tommy later recanted, later claiming that he actually saw a real UFO with Ed Walters. But because his parents were very religious, he didn't want to upset their worldview and decided to lie about faking the pictures with Ed. Additionally, when Tommy was questioned about how the photos were faked, he initially said they were double exposed. But when questioned about some of the more difficult photos, like the bush in front of the UFO or the light on the road in the famous road shot, he couldn't give an answer. After that interview, a little later on, Ed commented on it, challenging anyone to take a trampoline, turn it over on some grass for a few hours, and have nothing grow there for the next 18 months. There actually was official laboratory testing done by Pioneer Laboratory Incorporated. Here is the conclusion by Max E. Griggs from the University of Florida. In short, I have not been able to identify the cause of the grass dying, but evidence supports either the influence of short-lived toxic chemicals or exposure of the grass to an energy source capable of killing it. That is an official report. Another thing that I personally wanted to know about was some of the other physical evidence Ed claimed to have obtained. During one of the experiments, he reports one of the UFOs dropping down a black gooey substance. During his final encounter with the UFO, he claims to have had a black substance underneath his fingernails that had a really bad odor. I was not able to find any follow-up about this at all, not in that book or in Ed's follow-up book. I'm not saying nothing was done, just that I was not able to find anything, which was frustrating because I would love to see some testing done of that. It was also reported that before all this, Ed had a history of doing pranks with his kids at like little slumber parties and stuff. One of these reported pranks was apparently Ed Walters took a double exposure of his son or daughter dressed as a ghost, and whenever some of their friends would come over, he would take a picture of them as the double exposure so that when it developed in front of them, there would be like a ghost behind them. So that would suggest that Ed would have knowledge of trickery or photo trickery or double exposures. But a point of reservation that I've had about the entire case this whole time were the witnesses. We're talking about between 100 to 200 people that reported things. Craig Myers, the former Pensacola News Journal employee, claimed that it was a lot of Me Too-isms. Somebody saying they saw something and then the sort of psychological phenomenon of saying, oh, I saw that same thing too. A sort of mass hysteria type of thing. And while I do admit that there are cases of mass hysteria, I'm not entirely convinced that this would be a fitting example of it. It would be extremely convenient for that side of the argument to just say, well, they're just making it up, or they believe they saw something because they heard somebody else say they saw something. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying that's not the case, just I'm not seeing a whole lot of evidence for that. And as a matter of fact, one of the very first things I tried to do in doing this project was reaching out to any witnesses during the event, but I kept running into tons of roadblocks. Now granted, this is an event that happened 34 years ago. Several of the key players and witnesses had pretty much all passed away at this point. A pathologist who claimed to have seen it, named Fenner McConnell, he was deceased in 2005 by a hit-and-run driver. Doris and Charles Summerby, the two people that made an account at the beginning of the video, they had both passed away, with Doris having passed away in 2013. A Gulf Breeze City Councilwoman by the name of Brenda Pollock, who was very involved in the case as it was happening, claimed to have been a witness, also has passed away. Bland Pugh, the MUFON state director at the time, has also passed away. I was actually given information about him from somebody that wanted their identity to remain private, that gave me a long story about how Bland Pugh, the MUFON state director, and a bunch of other people during this time all had like a mass experience of missing time and levitation and very fantastic things. But he's passed away, so he can't give his side of the story. When I asked this person if they would be willing to be interviewed with me if I kept their identity secret, or give me the contact information of any one of those other witnesses, it kind of just fell flat from there. I followed up several times with them, but unfortunately I wasn't able to make that happen. I thought, perhaps naively, that I would be able to find at least one witness to talk with me in this video, and I was not able to find anyone. So if you are a Gulf Breeze resident that was around during this time that saw anything, please leave a comment down below. I would love to hear what you saw. One of the last things I want to talk about was the Oprah interview. This was something that kind of put a sour taste in my mouth about the whole case. There's an argument that Ed Walters and Phil Klass, who is a renowned UFO debunker, and an argument that they're having on the show.
He claims to have been abducted, and in fact, the mayor of his own town, Ed Gray III, has denounced this case as a hoax. I agree for many reasons.
I've never said that I've been abducted. I said
you have never said that. Reread your book.
Never, quote, read my lips. I have never said that I've been abducted.
The problem is that I read the book too, and while it's true that Ed kind of strongly implies that he was abducted during previous times of his life, does not come out and outright say it until you get to page 261 of his first book. When I was 41 years old, I photographed a UFO and was abducted, period. I don't know why he would be so adamant about saying that he was never abducted in this interview when he wrote it out blatantly. Speaking of the book, a lot of debunkers and critics cite this whole event as having financial incentive for him. He made a lot of money even from the initial offer of writing his book, to selling TV and film rights, to writing a follow-up book in 1994. But even in the book itself, he talks about why he decided to write it, and his explanation for that is because all of the news outlets that were reporting on the case kept getting small or significant details of what happened wrong. So his explanation is that he wrote his book to keep the story straight. But you know, this whole time I've only been talking about Ed Walters, discussing the book he's written and some of the alleged things he's said and done. Wouldn't it be nice to talk to him directly? So I set out to do just that. I was able to find some interesting things, one of which was that he legally changed his name, which is why tracking him down before was so difficult. But with some research and, quite frankly, a stroke of luck, I was able to track down one of his family members. I was later informed that the whole UFO situation was kind of a topic that they don't discuss at all anymore. I tried reaching out to this family member a multitude of times, but they would not respond to me when I tried explaining what I was doing. There's been a lot of rumors about the family members saying that the whole case was a hoax. When I've tried following up on that to sort of fact check that, I have only found dead ends. It's a lot of he said, she said, where I cannot find the original person that apparently was told by the family member that it was a hoax. So I'm not sure if I totally buy that without hearing it either from the source or from someone close to the source. So even though I wasn't able to get a hold of any family members, I was able to pull up some court records and believe I found not only where Ed Walters currently is, but also his contact phone number. And you know, I would take anything. I would, if he'd want to meet with me in person, if he'd want to Zoom me like Dr. Maccabee did, or if he just on the phone, I'll take anything at this point. So I'm actually gonna try and call him right now. And if we don't get any answer, or if it's disconnected or something, that's okay too, at least we tried.
sorry, you have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. If you feel you have reached this recording in error, please check the number and try your call again.
I figured that was a long shot, but I'm glad we tried. I actually got a little nervous there. My heart started beating kind of fast, so. So we looked up where Ed Walters lives, which is probably the most stalkerish thing I've done. Went to his front door, just rang the doorbell, and nobody answered. I was just wanting to talk to him to see if he wanted to say anything for the video or kind of have the final word, see if he had any of like the black tar that came from the UFOs or had any follow-up about that or just any general questions. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't want to talk to anybody about this anymore, dealing with this for like 34 years. It still would have been really cool to have met him for this project. So we gave contacting him my best shot. This case is so all over the place with weird accounts, credible witnesses, aliens, abductions, hypnosis, mass hysteria possibly, polygraph tests, cover-ups. And after all this, the case could go either way, fact or fiction. Because of every piece of evidence that denounces Ed Walters, there's a piece that supports him. Pretty much across the board. As for my personal thoughts, I'm really not sure after all this. I have gone back and forth with there being a real event or not a real event. The photos were faked, the photos weren't faked. Possible reasons for the witnesses that are so adamant and very clear in their retelling of what happened. Perhaps there was a real event that happened in Gulf Breeze and Ed Walters faked the photos as a prank, and before he knew it, it took on a life of its own. As a smart businessman, saw a possible avenue to make some money off of this. Maybe it's as simple as that. Or perhaps it's a story that is exactly as written. A man who was stalked and abducted by foreign visitors from another world who had tangible evidence, but nobody would believe him because the claims were so outlandish. I would love to know your thoughts on the case. Is it simple, straightforward, black and white? Or is it more complicated, more complex? Let me know what you think. A huge thank you to my Patreon supporters for making this project possible. I got to devote a couple of months of just shooting and research and editing to make a feature-length YouTube documentary. So thank you, patrons, so much for making that a reality for me. I had a blast making this. I'll also be putting some additional footage on Patreon, stuff that didn't make the cut for this. One of which is my buddy Matt Lane's very own UFO experience. Apparently he had a very detailed experience. So if you'd like to hear about that, check out my Patreon. If you don't want to devote to being a patron but still want to support the channel, check out our Gulf Breeze UFO t-shirts inspired by this project. Whether you're a local from the Pensacola Gulf Breeze area or just an avid UFO lover and researcher to the ancient astronaut theorist. Or maybe you're somebody that doesn't believe in UFOs at all but still think it's pretty interesting and pretty cool that this is what made Gulf Breeze famous. And I'd personally really appreciate it a lot if you checked it out. As always, everyone, I appreciate you watching, and remember, the truth is out there.
is it something that our own military is doing? That's what the people of Gulf Breeze...
You're just saying this is what you saw.
This is what I saw. I've had some very bizarre experiences. I don't believe personally it's a military craft. But I would love for Howard Bloom to shake this thing up enough to have the Congress have a hearing and let the military tell us once and for all, what are they doing? Are they flying something around? What's going on?